Hello, my name is Kevin, and in today's lesson, we will be talking about perpetual checks. A perpetual check can be directly described or accurately described from its name. Perpetual means over and over again or repeating in a loop. So a perpetual check would be a check that's repeating in a loop. And you might be thinking, why would we want a check to repeat in a loop? So what's the point of a check to repeat in a loop? So the use of a perpetual check is so we could turn a game from a losing position to a stalemate position. So I am going to show you how this works in the diagram right here. So right now, it's black's turn to move, and we can clearly tell that black is about to lose, as white can checkmate black with a single move if black doesn't make a wise choice by moving its queen to h7. Since black clearly is in a losing position, it's time for it, he could perform a perpetual check. So what he does is he moves his queen, he moves his black queen to b3, which checks the white king on b1. And since the white king has nowhere else to go except for a1, black can check the white king again by moving it to a3. And this pattern will keep on continuing until it ends in a draw, as both players cannot move anywhere else. And this is the idea of a perpetual check, a check that is looped, a check that's moving on and on and on. And as we can see, black has turned his game from a loss, as white is about to checkmate him, to a stalemate, and a stalemate is always better than a loss. So this is what a perpetual check is. Now time to do some problems. For our first problem, we could see that black is at a huge disadvantage. First off, white has two more pawns than black, and white has a bishop. What this means is that in open areas, a bishop can cover much more squares at a much faster rate than a knight can. So our goal is to have black stalemate the game by performing a perpetual check. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to figure this out on your own, and good luck. Now that you've given the problem some thought, here's the solution. As I said before, black's goal is to perform a stalemate because he's losing. Well, first we need to find a way to check, as that's the whole goal of a perpetual check, to repeat a check over and over again. So, as we see, the only check that black can perform with his knight is to move it to g3. Now, the white king on h1 is under attack, and now he must move to h2, as that is the only spot he can move to. Now we could just repeat this process by moving our black knight to f1, checking the king on h2, and now he has to move back to h1, and now we are just back at our starting position. So we can repeat this until we reach a stalemate. On to the next problem. For our next problem, it's white to move. Black has two rooks while white only has one. Before I let you solve the problem or figure it out on your own, I'm just going to tell you that this problem is going to involve a little bit more thinking than the last problem. Now that you've given the problem some thought, here's the solution. As I said before, the problem is going to be a little bit more complicated this time. So, it's white to move, and white's goal is to perform a perpetual check, or repeat a check over and over again. And as we can see, the queen on h5 is guarding the whole entire h column, so if the king were to move there, then the queen would guard that area. We could also see that the queen can guard the whole entire row 8 by moving it to E8. So if we got it to those two positions, then we can perform our perpetual check, as the king cannot move anywhere else other than the squares that the queen can guard. So how can we get our queen to E8? Well, we could simply move it there, but then the black rook on B8 can just take it. So this is why we need to first move our white rook to E8, which threatens a checkmate if the black rook doesn't take it, since the black king cannot go anywhere else. So the black rook is forced to take our white rook on E8, and through this exchange, we could take the black rook on E8 as well. So now that we've gotten the queen in the desired positions, everything else is simple. So the black king can only move to H7, so we move our queen back to H5, and the black king can only move to G8 after that, and we can move our queen back to E8. So as we can see, this is an infinite loop of the checking of the black king, and now we have won white a stalemate instead of a loss. On to our next problem. Our third and final problem is going to be a two-part problem. It's black's turn to move, and what I mean by two-part problem is whenever we check the white king on H2 with the goal of a perpetual check, there are two different ways that the white king can move. I want you to keep this in mind as I give you some time to solve this problem. Now that you've hopefully given the problem some thought, here's the solution. So if we want to perform a perpetual check, we have to first check the king. And as I said before, it's black's turn to move, and the only way for black to check the white king on H2 is to move its black knight to G4. And what this does is it checks the white king, and now white has two different ways that it can move its king. First, it can move to H3, or it can move down to H1. Let's do H3 first. If the white king moves to H3, then we can move our black knight to F2, checking the white king again. The white king cannot move up any further since the black pawn is blocking or guarding that square. So the white king is forced to move back down again. Now we can move our black knight to G4, and the process repeats. So that's our first way that the white king can move. But what if the white king moves to H1? Well, if the white king moves to H1, we need to try to keep on checking the king. So again, we move our black knight to F2. And the white king can either choose to move back to H2, but that would just cause it to repeat forever, resulting in a stalemate, or it could choose to move to G1. And if the white king does this, then we can move our knight to H3. This is also an example of a double check, as the bishop on B6 is checking the king while the knight on H3 is also checking the king. Since the king cannot move to F1, since the black rook is blocking that square, it's forced to move back to H1. And now we can move our black knight back to F2. And then the process repeats again. So that was it for perpetual checks.